Hi, my name is Dustin with Life Changing Belief. And today I was thinking while preparing my Sunday school lesson about different questions that may come up. I'm going to be going through the Gospel of Mark with my Sunday school class, and I was just thinking about what are some questions that can come up. One question that I've heard come up time and time again is, why are the Gospels different? You'll read one account where one person says, "Oh, one man came out." Then another one says two. One says, "Oh, there's 5,000." One says 7,000. Why are there all these differences? Obviously, they can't be true because there's so many differences. That's what I hear people say, but that's not the case. I wanted to just do a very short video about why there are differences in the Gospels. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but the Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they're written different times to different audiences. Mark was probably the first one written to the Romans. Matthew was written to the Jews, so on and so forth. Luke was a doctor, and he was writing primarily to probably a Greco-Roman audience. And then John was writing to believers. He was writing to Christians. And if you look, each one has a different theme that they're emphasizing. So first I want to point out, though, before we even get into the themes, they're different authors. That's why they're named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're different authors, and they're telling the same stories, but from different perspectives. And people have different memories. We don't all, for instance, I may sit in church service, and I will have a different perspective than the person who's sitting across the auditorium. There may be something in the message that speaks to me in a certain way, but it may speak to someone else in a different way, depending on our backgrounds, depending on where we've come from. So what you see, you got Matthew. He was a publican tax collector. They were known to be thieves, basically, where not only did they tax unjustly, but they also they betrayed their own people by working with the Romans. And not only that, but they also were known to steal, where they would tell people, "Oh, well, your taxes are going to be this much," when in reality it's much less, just so they can get extra money. So you got Matthew, who's writing from that perspective. You got Luke, who he's a doctor. He's writing from a medical perspective. So he's going to be a little more detailed whenever he's looking at the issues. He's looking at different things from a different perspective. All these people have different backgrounds, different perspectives, and that comes out in the writing. So we got to remember that whenever we're reading the Gospels, who's writing what. So obviously that's going to come out a little more. Luke uses some medical terminology that was used during that time period because he was a doctor. So he's going to use that. Also, we got to look, who's the audience? The book of Mark is written almost as an action adventure, epic, because that's what the Romans were used to. That's what they thought of heroism. That was a virtue to them. So because of that, he wrote showing Jesus as our hero. John wrote showing Jesus as our God, because during the time when he wrote it, the deity of Christ was in question. He's writing to the believers, "Hey, he is God, and here's why. Let me tell you my experience with him." Matthew, Jesus is king, because he's writing to the Jews, showing them that he is the king that they have been waiting for. He is the Messiah. So because of that, there may be different stories that are being talked about. We don't just need to assume, because there was a fish in both of them, it was the same event. We don't need to assume that. There could have been multiple. John even says that if we wrote down all the miracles that Christ did, there wouldn't be enough pen and paper to write it all down, just because of how much Christ actually did while he was on earth, all of his miracles. So we don't need to assume that they're the same, but also we need to remember they're a different perspective written to a different people and for different purposes. So with that in mind, whenever we're reading the Gospels, we need to see, there are going to be differences. Different people are telling the same story, but for a different intended reason to a different audience. So we need to remember that whenever we're reading the Gospels, not just jump to the conclusion, "Oh, well, obviously it's wrong because there's a difference." That's not the right conclusion. we need to remember that God inspired it all. It is all God breathed. All these gospels. And yeah, there may be differences, but those differences are there for a reason. They're there to bring out a different point, to show a different image. Think about it like you see a car accident happen at an intersection. One light will show one angle, another light will show another angle. The driver that's in the lane across, he'll see it from a different perspective as an eyewitness, and the person that's standing there on the corner will see it from a different perspective. You have 4 different perspectives being shown there besides that of the drivers. And you'll see that not all their descriptions are going to match perfectly. One may say, oh, well, the light had just turned green. So because he saw it from that perspective, he saw it because he was in view of the light. Someone else who's not in view of the light, or one of the cameras that's not in view of the light, may not show it. So with that in mind, when you're reading the gospel, just remember that there are different perspectives, that they saw different things for different reasons. But either way, they all had one thing in common. The one thing that they all matched on is the gospel of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ was God. None of them beg to differ on that. You have 4 witnesses, eyewitnesses come into a courtroom and all give the same story and all say the same conclusion. That's going to look really good in court. That's basically what happened with the Gospels. None of them are wrong. None of them are in error. But they all show different perspectives, and they all show something different about God, something that's different about Him. That's the purpose. One thing that I would like to recommend that I'm using for my Sunday school class to help me see more is Baker's Harmony of the Gospel. So in this book, I have a paperback spiral edition. In this book, he goes through and he shows all the Gospels side by side, where you can see how it's broken down, where it has all the Gospels side by side on the event. So you can actually see, okay, well, on this passage, he says it this way, and this passage is a lot more, so this passage is a lot more detailed than this passage over here, and you can see what are they saying side by side. That way you can see it's the same story, but they all have different details. So this is one resource that I recommend just so people can actually go through and see. So my edition is the Baker House edition, the Baker Book House edition in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I would recommend this as a resource if you're really wanting to study the Gospels and see more, the different perspectives, to learn more about Christ and learn more about the first 4 books of the Gospel. I highly recommend this resource, and I highly recommend you just keep studying the Scripture and realize that Jesus is Lord. So with that in mind, let's go out, tell someone about Christ, and let's just go through and see what God does.